Okay. And looks like we're on. Okay, Baruch Hashem. We are learning together in this beautiful night of Hanukkah. It's a time for learning Torah. This is the fifth night of Hanukkah specifically. It's a very beautiful night to increase our Torah learning, just like 5 is more than halfway now past 8, right? So 2, our light should be increased from this point on in many ways. So the parsha we're in is Mikeitz, and typically learned at Hanukkah time. There are a lot of similar messages. I think we've spoken about this in previous years, but let's get right into it. The quick summary of the parsha is that we have had Yosef imprisoned in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, unlawfully, and he interpreted some dreams. And now Pharoah himself has a dream, and nobody's able to interpret it properly. They send in eventually for Yosef. He comes in, he interprets the dream as a national dream, something that's going to affect the entire nation and maybe the entire world. There's going to be a famine. It's going to be 7 years of plenty in Egypt and 7 years of famine. And there are ways he gives advice of how to prepare for it. He is brought up to a higher position, the second in command in Egypt. His brothers, who are different interpretations of why exactly they come down, it seems that they were also running out of food, or should have been running out of food. They come down to Egypt. He remembers his dreams, and he acts upon them in a way to make sure that they occur with his brothers bowing down to him. Not all the brothers are down there, and so he makes things difficult for them until they bring down Binyamin as well. When they eventually bring down Binyamin, he basically makes it seem as though Binyamin stole something from him, and the reaction and the protest against this is going to be indicated in next week's parsha in Vayigash, God willing. So that's basically the parsha in a nutshell. And now we're going to go into our classic deep dive into the sources to see the verses in some sort of deeper senses and see what we can learn from the great sages of the past and of our time, God willing. All right, so we're going to start with chapter 41, verse 33. So this is where Yosef has just interpreted the dream. By the way, in the previous years, we spent quite a bit of time on the dream itself and the whole situation with the butler forgetting Yosef, remembering him, reluctantly advising Paro to ask Yosef's advice. Do you hear me, by the way?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Phew. Can't always tell. I'm looking here, the mute button's on green. I don't know what that means. That might mean it's on. No, obviously you hear me. That's good. All right. Let's thank you for letting me know. Let's continue. Anyway, so if you want to look in the previous videos on this, go to the YouTube channel. You can see we spent quite a bit of time on the first few verses of the parsha. Today we're going to just basically skip through all that and get into, okay, he interpreted the dream and he interpreted it well, and then Paro's reaction is strange. And then not only does he interpret the dream, but he also tells Paro what to do. He's like, well, since I interpreted the dream and nobody asked me my advice, I'm going to give my advice unsolicited anyway, which is an unusual thing. It seems like normal for us because we live in a society where people speak their mind on a regular basis. Sometimes without having a mind, they're speaking their mind. But in the time of Yosef, it's especially in front of Paro, you don't just up and give advice unless you're asked. And he's literally a nobody. He's a Hebrew slave in prison, right? He's in the lowest, if there's a totem pole, he's on the lowest rung of that. He's on the the tail end of the hierarchy in Egypt. And for him to jump to the point of speaking to the king unasked is really amazing, and especially the older commentaries deal with this in quite a bit of detail. But we'll see even more contemporary commentaries deal with this as well, because it says after he gives his advice, which is that Egypt should, keep during the 7 years of plenty, try to store up the food, and during the 7 years of famine, distribute it in some way to the populace. Seems like a pretty sensible advice. The verse says, Paro says, "Ve'ata yera Paro ish navon v'chacham." So he gives the advice that what should Paro do? He should find a very smart, wise person, v'yishitehu al eretz Mitzrayim, and that person is going to oversee the land of Egypt. So that's his advice. This is that advice, that unsolicited advice that Yosef pipes up and says. And so Rav Eli Munk, in the Call of the Torah, writes like this, and he basically summarizes a lot of the classic interpretations into his own, in his usual beautiful style. So what he says here is, after interpreting the dreams, Joseph takes the initiative of offering Paro advice without being given the authority to do so. No one had solicited these suggestions, but in recommending that the king appoint as chief administrator an understanding and wise man, Joseph was thinking of himself, obviously, as Ramban indicates. Quite understandably, Joseph must have looked upon the sudden and sensational fashion in which he was brought before Paro as a providential event. He knew that obviously this comes from Hashem. He still held a belief in his dreams of adolescence and felt that the long-awaited turning point in his destiny had at last arrived. This kind of thing doesn't happen on a regular day. People don't get freed from Egypt to go interpret dreams for Paro. So, from prison. So here he is, definitely a unique opportunity. He takes advantage of this unique opportunity. This he did without hesitating. And the counsel which he offered to Paro, which with lightning speed was so pertinent and so favorable to the king that he was tremendously impressed. The king was impressed. This is very similar to what Rav Chaim Kanievsky writes in Talmud Dekra. By the way, I just realized I photocopied the wrong. I scanned the wrong part of Talmud Dekra for this. This is on the same verse, but it's a different topic somewhat. But I'll say outside what Rav Chaim says, if I may. He basically asks the same question: why does Yosef pipe up and say anything at all in this particular situation? And it's a very important lesson that he's trying to teach us. And that lesson is, you are obligated to speak up when you're sure about something. You're confident. And when you're confident about something, it shows through. People will know that what you're doing and what you're saying is right. As you see actually happen in this verse. Because Yosef, the Paro could have said, "What, did you just say something to me? Off with your head." But that's not the response. What does Paro do? Paro says, yeah, you're right. We should find somebody. And I don't know anybody smarter than you. And he's looking at his advisors like, do you guys think anybody better than this guy is ready for this job? And nobody says a thing. Everybody's very confident about him because he showed confidence in his own words. He says, this is the truth. The truth is, this is going to happen. My dream, your dream that I interpreted, that God helped me interpret for you, is not just some random dream about your daughters, about this, about that. It's not just it's not just a crazy dream. It's prophecy that God is giving you, and there's a way to take care of it. And here's how you do it. So he bolstered the interpretation by giving his advice. They're not two disconnected things. And as was pointed out just now, his bolstering it that way gave the king the confidence to give him this job. the king wouldn't have thought of it himself. Like, I need to find somebody. Where am I going to find somebody to do this for me? Maybe I'll outsource this. Maybe there's somebody in India who's available. No, that's not what he does. Because he gives this advice, because Yosef gives this advice, the Paro has no other choice. It's so obvious to him that this person is confident about it, and with the confidence of the interpretation comes confidence in the job that he's sure he's going to do, and he's going to do well. Okay. I find it interesting that more or less Rav Munk and Rav Kanievsky both say pretty much the same kind of idea in different words. And that is that the situation itself lent itself to Yosef to speak up. In other words, if he wouldn't have spoken up, it would have been bad for him. And he felt the need to speak up because of this confidence in the interpretation. Okay. We're going to skip a little bit to chapter 41, still same chapter. Chapter 41, we're going to skip from 33 to 45, so 12 verses down. Chapter 41, verse 45, Mem Aleph, Mem Hey. It says, after Yosef gets this job and he gets set up with a wife, as we're about to see in this verse, he also gets a name change. Vikra Paro Shem Yosef. Paro called Yosef's name Tzafnat Paneach, which is difficult to translate. Rashi has one interpretation, but it's not for now. But whatever it is, it's not Yosef. It's Tzafnat Paneach. V'itenlo Asnat Bat Poti Pharoah Cohen On Lisha. He gave him this lady by the name of Asnat, the daughter of Poti-Pherah. Chazal tell us that Asnat was not actually the daughter of Poti-Pherah, that this Asnat was actually adopted by Poti-Pherah, and that she's actually the daughter of Dinah, the product of the rape, when she was taken by Shechem. Anyway, so and that's and Yosef now marries her, and that's who Asnat is. Later, Yosef al Eretz Mitzrayim, and then Yosef traveled around Eretz Mitzrayim, and there's a number of reasons why he would do this. There's practical reasons as well. Remember, he's now the overseer of Mitzrayim, and although everything's still fine and dandy, the fact is he needs to know what he's going to be dealing with. He needs to really get literally the lay of the land and find out how to best organize and distribute the funds and the foods that he's going to be in charge of. Okay. Anyway, what I'd like to spend a little bit of time on right now is this name, Tzafnat Paneach. We're going to look at two commentaries on this verse, one from the Khatam Sofer, and then we're going to look at a very long, very deep Moshe David Valeh, who's, as we've mentioned before, student, friend, teacher of Chaim David Luzzatto, the Ramchal. Chaim David? Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. Sorry. Getting names confused here. All right, so the Khatam Sofer writes, Tzafnat Paneach, Eit Hashem Haitazot. It was from Hashem that this happened, that he changed his name to Tzafnat Paneach. Think about it for a second. Hesiv Paro Shemo, that Paro changed his name, is from Hashem. That Paro did this, and Paro was inspired by Hashem to do this, into Tzafnat Paneach. If he wouldn't have done this, nitparsem b'Mitzrayim b'shem zeh shekaru hamelech kedei lo yadu la'achim shesham adon haaretz Yosef. Imagine if he wouldn't have changed his name from Yosef. He'd be traveling around the country, as it says he does in the very next words of the verse. He's traveling around Mitzrayim. Everybody knows, hey, there goes Yosef, second in command. everybody bow, right? So there's Yosef. Everybody knows his name. Then, as we know, a few years later, his brothers are going to come, and everybody in town is going to know that this guy's name is Yosef. So what are the brothers going to know? Pretty soon, that the guy they're bowing in front of, the guy who's in charge of everything, is Yosef. They're going to scratch their heads, scratch their beards, and realize, wait a minute, we know this guy. And that's going to end the entire ruse that he's planning, the whole trick that he's trying to do in order to make sure that his brothers bow down to him and fulfill the prophecy. So, as we're going to see next week's parsha and in this week's parsha. So, obviously, that can't happen. So it must be from Hashem that his name was changed in this way. I mentioned that Paro has Rashi has an interpretation of what Tzafnat Paneach means, and you may be curious what I was referring to. So Rashi says that it comes from certain roots that mean the person who explains what is hidden. Right? Tzafnat, explainer of Paneach, of that which is Paneach, that which is unclear. So easy way to interpret it is he's obviously he interpreted Paro's dream, so he's the explainer of the hidden, because dreams are a hidden thing. Their interpretation isn't always easy to do, as we learned about literally last week when Yosef interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker. Okay, Ramad Rav Moshe David Valeh. Sorry, this is small. I'm going to try to make this a bit bigger if I can. Hopefully it's not going to be too warped. Oh, there we go. That's fine. You can see that, I'm sure. So he says, and this shouldn't surprise you because we just saw a similar idea from the Khatam Sofer. Veda, you should know. Ki hayazem min hashamayim lebet tamim acherim. There are two other reasons why this is obviously from Hashem that his name was changed here. First of all, ha'alef hu ki nishtana mazalo, because one thing we've already encountered many times is that when you change the name of somebody, when somebody's name is changed, the person's mazel also changes. What exactly mazel is, this is not a class for that, but it's worth mentioning at least that mazal translates as a flow, right? We all have sort of like a pipeline from Shemayim. Obviously, it's not a physical thing. This is all metaphoric, right? We all have a pipeline from Shemayim. Certain good and certain maybe not so good things happen to us, and that's our mazel. And there are a number of ways to change a mazel. One of them classically is to change names. So if you changing your name is one of the ways to change your mazel. There are a number of reasons why that works, and happens to be Rav Valeh goes into it a little bit, but suffice it to say that the most important thing for you to know is that your name means something about you. Not just your mazel, but also your character and your strengths and your weaknesses are all in your name. And what your mazel is, that flow, has to do with your strengths and your weaknesses. And we want in times when we want to change that, if a person's mazel is bad enough, if a person's, for example, classic example of when we change somebody's name, so the person is deathly ill, obviously that mazel is not ideal. So we try to fix it by changing a name. Of course, that's under extremely unique circumstances. It shouldn't be done just oops, I have a cold, oh, I've got COVID, or God forbid, some other minor, even major illness. We don't jump to the opportunity to change the name. And by the way, changing the name is a real thing. In other words, when you change somebody's name, it's you're really, it's supposed to be a different name. You can't call that person by the old name anymore. You change I don't know, Shmuel to Aaron Shmuel, right? You're not gonna you have to call him Aaron Shmuel for the rest of his life, and even after his passing. Yeah. So that's an important thing. Okay, so see, there's another reason. So he said he was going to be two reasons. I'm trying to find the second reason. One second. Basically, his second reason is very organized. Give me a moment. Right. So the second reason is, as we said before, the second reason is the Fishayu Atidim Ache Yosef Levo Be'eretz Mitzrayim, just like the Chatam Sofer said, his brothers are going to be going to Mitzrayim pretty soon. Lishbor Ochel to get food. Yosef from Yosef himself. And if they know that his name is Yosef, they're going to recognize him immediately. Shahu Yosef Achiham, that he's their brother. Shemikaruhu le'eved be'eretz Mitzrayim, v'achshav nasa melech v'nitkaimu cholumotav. They're going to realize that he is the person that they sold. Hashem Yitbarach hayarotze sheyamod hadavar b'tzitom kol hazman shetzarich shekablu onshem hashvatim. So Hashem wanted this to be secret until it would be revealed. By the way, he says there's another way we know that this reason was that this was meant to be hidden. She explains that this is just like Rashi, that's the reason for the name Safna Paneach. It gets into Kabbalah here, but part of the name has to do with the fact that he was able to figure out something from the depths, right? From the very depths of information that we're not always supposed to know. He was able to know, and that's what made him unique. Okay, so that's a little bit about Safnat Paneach and why his name was changed, and we see that Baruch Hashem, from rabbis from all walks of life, separated by 100 or so years of scholarship, agree with at least in some ways to the reasons for his name. And the rest of this long commentary is rather Kabbalistic if you have time to look through it and you understand some of the concepts of the Sfirot that we learned about a few years ago when we had our Kabbalah class with Keter, etc. So you'll know that he says, for example, just real quick, Tzafnat She'ola Kiminyan Keter. If you see the gematria of Tzafnat, it's the same gematria as Keter, which is crown, which is symbolic of the kingship aspect of Hashem. That's not for now. Sorry, shouldn't have teased you with that. Okay, what am I doing? Okay, let's get back into the parsha. We're going to skip to the next chapter, Parshat Mikeitz, chapter 42, verse 2. Membet bet says Vayomer Hine Shamati. This is when Yaakov tries to get his sons to go to Mitzrayim to get food. And there's a huge machloket, I think we've dealt with it in previous years, if I'm not mistaken, about why exactly he sends his sons to get food. We would think it's because, they don't have food, so he has to send them. So the problem with that explanation is that we don't want to ever say that Eretz Yisrael is lacking in any way, right? So it couldn't be that they were actually lacking food, and so some interpretations want to say weren't lacking food. He sent them because they should have been lacking food. Their neighbors would have been jealous of them. Rashi says this amongst others, and so that's what he says. So it says when he sends them, he says, he says to them, I heard there's food in Egypt. Redu Shama, go down there. Misham, get some food from there for us. V'nihia v'lo namus, so that we will live and we will not die. Good reason to get food, to live and not die. Now, aside from, Paul McCartney lyrics, doesn't living imply not dying? Bring me food so that I will live, ... and not die. But it seems a little, a little extra there, no? It seems where to say I need this food so I will live makes sense. Now, by the way, not really something that this commentary is going to go into, but it's worth asking, why is he speaking this way at all? We don't usually, one of the lessons we've learned before in many other contexts is that the Jewish way to speak is not to mention the negative whenever it's avoidable, right? To say, bring me food so I will live, already implies it's for health, right? Already implies that you want to not die. We don't want to use words like don't, like die, right? The English word. The Hebrew word die is fine. It's enough. So, but the English word die, we don't want to use negative words. That's not how we usually speak. So it's a little bit strange that here is Yaakov, and he's saying, "Bring us food so that we will live and not die." And there's, I'm sure, a number of commentaries about why he uses this kind of language. But today we're going to look at the Hamek Davar. The Hamek Davar, written by Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, commonly known by the acronym NITZIV, the Rosh Yeshiva in Europe, wrote an amazing commentary on the Torah called Hamek Davar. I'm a little bit surprised no one's translated it yet into English, but hey, listen. You can't have it all. But so he says here a very short but very important comment. Kvar biyarnu kama pamim. He's already explained many times. We haven't seen his entire commentary, so I'm not exactly sure where he's referring to here. Shoresh chai mishma'u kopanim chayim below mavet. The point of life is to live and not die. That's the definition of chai. That's what chai means. Kama pamim, chayim, semechim beli, atzvon, ushfalut. And many times chayim could also mean other things. It could also be mean like happiness. L'chaim. You're not saying just to life, it's like to a happy life, to a good life, to a satisfying life. We'll move on lefiha inyan. And now based on this, based on these two different ways of seeing what Chaim means, this is going to explain why he used the language that he did. Kasher haya li'olam beito shel Yaakov mitparnes berucha. Since they had plenty, they were a satisfied group, Yaakov's house. He was a rich man. Bring back food enough so that we'll have the same kind of opulence we were used to. Right? Bring back the amount of food and the kind of food that's going to help us feel happy and rich like we are. Maybe that's what he means. Bring back food. If that's all he would have said, that's what the brothers would have thought. That's why in Cain, Pirash Yaakov Dezeh Efshar Lasor Hit Adon Bishat Ravon Medina Bitzar. You're not supposed to feel that way when other people are suffering, when there's famine around you and the country is in pain. You can't just go back to your opulent ways, lock yourself up in your rich family compound and gorge yourself on fancy foods and edibles while everybody else is suffering around you. That's why he tells them, bring back food so that we will live and not die. What kind of live? Not opulent living, basic living. The kind where life means not dying. Because it's impossible to live, literally live, right, without bread and the basics. And so he's telling them, bring back the basics. Don't go and be extravagant and bring back, Egyptian chocolate bars and whatever else, right? Just go there and bring back what we need, the cereals, the basics, so that we will be able to survive this famine. That's how that's understood, and I think that's a beautiful and very important lesson, especially we live in a time. Not my favorite topic to speak about, but it's worth remembering. We do live in a time of great anti-Semitism. Perhaps nothing new. Perhaps I don't want to get into the numbers of whether it's increasing, whether it's getting worse, etc. Certainly, a lot of the anti-Semitism that we see, at least especially on the East Coast, in New York and such, a lot of that has to do with jealousy, and a lot of that jealousy has to do. We have to be honest about this. A lot of that jealousy, and I've said this before, so I don't feel like these are chidushim. A lot of the jealousy that's felt in the communities against the Jews in New York and such has to do with the showy lifestyle that many Jews live. Let's be honest. Right? If you're wealthy, your job is to be generous, but your job is also to live like Yaakov, to be frugal, not to be especially opulent, not to go around and have giant, barbecues while there's people suffering and dying of hunger all around you. It's one thing to be successful and rich, and Baruch Hashem, our people can do that sometimes. Not everybody, but some people are financially successful, and there's a responsibility that comes along with that. And one of those responsibilities comes with this lesson that we can learn from Yaakov, and that is to not be overly showy with the foods that you get and the benefits and the privileges that you enjoy. Okay, enough about that. I try not to go into my rants. I apologize if that's not what you're tuning in for. You just want to learn the parsha. I understand. Okay, so let's move on. So we're still in chapter 42. We're going to skip to verse 11. So 42:11, Mem Bet Yud Aleph, and the brothers come down to Egypt. Yosef basically entraps them, accuses them of being spies, and they're obviously not spies. And one of the proofs that the brothers say that they are not spies is this verse. This is their proof. Imagine this in a courtroom, right? Kulanu b'nei ish echad nachnu keinim anachnu v'lo hayu avadecha meraglim. All of us are the sons of one man, and we are honest people, and we're not spies. Your servants, that's what he calls himself. Your servants, speaking to Yosef, we're not spies. How is that going to prove to Yosef that they're not spies? Right? They're not saying, ask our friends. They're saying we're all the sons of one man, and that's proof. How is that proof that you're not spies? So to get an answer, we're going to go to the Ralbag. Ralbag is a classic commentary. Unfortunately, we don't quote very often. Certainly worthwhile to look at least once in a while, or really always. But so he asks, he quotes the verse. It's here in the middle of the top line here. Klana b'nei ish echad nachnu. Kabalti beperush zeh hapasuk meharav. He doesn't remember exactly where he heard this from. Right? So it's impossible for me to remember where I got this from. But he says, Ki zeh amru la'amet she'ena meraglim. So they said as proof that they're not spies. Lefi shemeraglim holchim b'sakana atzuma. Obviously, spies go and travel in a very dangerous lifestyle, right? What was that show that was popular a few years ago? Most dangerous jobs in America or something like that, right? Or most dangerous jobs in the world. So whatever it is, spying is one of the most dangerous jobs, easily, right? You have to hide your identity. You have to be careful how and what you do all the time. You have to be very focused. And obviously, I would imagine it's not an easy thing to do. There are a lot of ways to slip up and get yourself in trouble. So they have to go, go between as they travel the thin road between life and death. And it's not normal for one man to send 10 of his sons to do this dangerous work. You hear that? The proof that they are not spies is the fact that they are brothers. Because no father in his right mind would send all 10 of his sons, this many sons, to do the same job when this job is so dangerous. We even have, as far as I know, there's even such a rule in many armies, even the most terrible warlike states will still not insist usually that one family send all of their sons to the front to fight, right? Because it would be a terrible, devastating loss. First of all, it's a terrible, devastating loss for anybody to fall, for any child to die. But imagine all of your children doing a dangerous thing together. That would be that's not something that any sane father would do. So it's too dangerous. They wouldn't have. Obviously, the fact that they are all in the same place at the same time, that's an obvious proof that indeed it can't be that they are actually spies. It'd be impossible. And he goes on from there. Basically, the rest of the Ralbag here, I just wanted to have it there for you in case you take the time to look through it. It's a pretty easy piece to translate. Basically, what he says there is once it's a good proof, right? As is commonly the problem in Torah interpretation, once you give side A a very good interpretation, a very good reason to say what they do, your next problem is going to be, now explain to me why side B doesn't take bait. Right? Why didn't Yosef accept their proof as proof? It's like, that's a good point. See ya. Right? So that's why that's the rest of this piece. See that at your own time. It's a very beautiful, very logical explanation. But that's the idea. The idea is any father who cares about his children, and we assume parents do, would not send all of his or so many of his sons to do the same job at the same time, if it's a dangerous job like that. Okay, let's skip a little further. He imprisons them in the hopes that they will then be able to be compelled to go back to Israel and bring their youngest brother, Binyamin, down to him, so that he'll have the prophecy fulfilled of all of his brothers bowing to him, including Binyamin. That's the way Rashi and many of the other commentaries, the Gemara, that's how we understand this verse in general. So he says to them, right? He says to them, "Vayomer alehem Yosef," after 3 days of being in prison, "Vayom hashlishi," on the third day of them being in prison, "Zot asu v'chiyu," do this and live. Et halakim ani yareh. I fear Hashem. I'm a God-fearing person. So, as is normal, as is pretty common for our class, we've seen, and we've already seen that in today's class, where he says, where Yaakov says, "V'chiyu v'lo lamot," right? That v'lo namut, right? So he says to live and not to die. Obviously, there's a point, there's a lesson to be learned from this extra word, because it would still make sense without those two words, without v'lo namut. So here also, this entire verse would make absolute sense, even without Yosef saying, "Zot asu," do this, right? You could just say, "I fear Hashem," and then the next verse where he tells them what to do, which is to go back to Israel, to leave Shimon in prison, and to go back to Israel, and to get Binyamin and bring him back. So in Aderet Eliyahu, one of the commentaries on the Torah written by the Ben Ish Chai, Yosef Chaim of Baghdad writes that we know that there are 3 mitzvot, and this is a good Hanukkah drasha. So if you're looking for a Dvar Torah to share at your Shabbat table on Rosh Chodesh, Shabbat Hanukkah, right? Beautiful special day that we're about to have tomorrow night, where, by the way, we have the longest benching of the year, right? It's you have Al Hanisim for Hanukkah, you have Ritzei for Shabbat, and you have the Yalav Yavo for Rosh Chodesh, all in the same benching. So the benching on Shabbat is very special. All 3 of them. Do what you can to make sure you have your 3 meals. All right. Anyway, so he says that there are 3 things we know that the Syrian Greeks, tried to keep the Jewish people from doing. And those 3 things are Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, and Brit Milah. Those are the first major decrees that the Greeks had, because those all show the distinctiveness of the Jewish people. Shabbat is a day of rest only for the Jewish people. Non-Jews are not even allowed to rest on Shabbat the way we do. Rosh Chodesh, celebrating the new month the way we do, is unique for us. And remember, the renewal of the moon, the renewal of the month, the renewal of the Jewish people constantly is all connected. And Brit Milah is a physical act done to a Jewish boy, which makes the Jewish boy visibly distinct from the non-Jewish children. So he says, if you look at the word zot, zot asu, one second. Right, so Zot is made out of 3 letters: Zayin, Aleph, and Taf. So Zayin is the gematria of 7. Shabbat is the 7th day of the week. So there's the reference to that. The Aleph is the second letter, is the gematria for Aleph is 1, and it refers to the first day of the month, Rosh Chodesh, right? Number one, day number one of Rosh Chodesh. And the letter Taf at the end represents Brit Milah. Why does it represent Brit Milah? So I had to actually look this up because it doesn't really say here very clearly why Taf means Brit Milah, but it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Taf is the last letter. It's the finishing off of something. The Brit Milah sort of physically finishes off the child, right? In other words, maybe finish off isn't the right phrase. Completes the child, right? Just like Taf completes the Aleph Bet. But also the word Taf and the shape of it classically is it's considered like a building, a mark, right? A sign, and that's what a Brit Milah is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a sign on the boy, and so that's what he says here. That these three mitzvot are being hinted to by Yosef. Now, stop the presses. Why? I don't mean the presses. All right. What are we talking about? What is that? What is the connection between these guys being in prison in Egypt and several hundred years later, 1,000 years later, with the Greeks, more than 1,000 years later, the Greeks making trouble for the Jewish people? What's happening? So the answer is he's trying to hint to them about how a Jew should live. A Jew lives with Zot, with Shabbat, with Rosh Chodesh, with Brit Milah, with all the things that all those three things symbolize and represent, the uniqueness of being a Jew. Otherwise, if you're not doing that, you're basically imprisoned, is what he's saying. The Ben Ish Chai is alluding to the whole act of all three of these things. The way we celebrate Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh and Brit Milah, all of those things make us unique. And without that uniqueness, what are we? This is a great time of the year to go on this rant. And it's definitely worth thinking about. Like, what does Hanukkah mean to most people? And most Jewish people. Non-observant Jewish people are celebrating Hanukkah. It is possibly the most celebrated Jewish holiday of the year. All right, they're eating their latkes, they're spinning their dreidels, they're maybe eating sufganiyot, and they're lighting candles, whether electric or otherwise, right? But they're lighting candles. And so if you were to stop one of them and ask, what is the significance of this holiday? They'll say something to the effect of, it reminds us of our traditions, or they'll say something like, this reminds me of my beautiful memories of my bubby, or they'll say something to the effect of, well, we don't have Christmas, so we should have something, right? We also need a jolly holiday. Let me tell you something. This is going to be very well known it'll be on Facebook. This will be on YouTube pretty soon, and so I'm not afraid to say this in public. Right? Hanukkah is not a jolly holiday. It is barely a happy holiday. It's only happy in that we don't mourn on Hanukkah. We don't give eulogies on Hanukkah. But the happiness is not, we are able to keep our traditions, whatever they are. That's not what it's about. Most of the people who died in the war that culminated in Hanukkah were Jewish people, the Hellenistic Jewish people. So this is a holiday celebrating not being a Hellenist. It's not celebrating our traditions. It's not. It's the antithesis it's the antithesis of Hellenism. What's Hellenism? So it's worth studying. The ideas of the superiority of intellectual knowledge over Torah. We don't believe that. Whatever intellectual knowledge we do agree with and or encourage, whatever knowledge that is, whatever science and literature and everything else we do approve of, it's not in any way equal to or greater than Torah. It is much, much below Torah. It's incomparably less than Torah. Torah has all the truth in it, and all of the other sciences and all of the other systems of education, all of them are trying to find little pieces here and there, little nuggets of the truth that the Torah is filled with. Every line, every letter of Torah has truth in it. Without the Torah and without these mitzvot, without actual Judaism, we're just going through motions, living on autopilot. All right, enough of a rant on that. We still have 2 more verses at least that I wanted to look at, I think. If I'm not mistaken. Oh boy, got quite a bit to do. Let's see what we can do today, okay? Brothers go back to Yaakov and they tell Yaakov, you know what, we can't really go back without Binyamin. And Yaakov is very upset with them. And then they say to him, Vayomer Elinu Ha'ish, that's not right. Oh, adon should be right. Adon ha'aretz, this man was the Safari messed up here. Is the master of the land, Bezot Eda Kikenim Atim. He wanted to know if we were honest. Achichem Echad. We told him that we were brothers of one person. Hanichlo iti et Ravon Betechem Kchu v'lechu. He told us to leave one of our brothers and to go and feed our family, and then come back with the other brother that we didn't bring the first time, which is Binyamin. So it says Rav Hirsch, right? Here by the word Adonai is not used in a religious sense. It means the master. Adonai ha'aretz means the master of the land. That's what they called Yosef. There's a distinction, says Rav Hirsch, between Baal and Adon. We have these words very often in our literature, and they both mean master. Baal denotes one who dominates by his power, or at least one who is in a superior position. Adon denotes a lord in a different, nobler respect. Adon related to Adan, which is the base of a pillar, right? Adonim, which are like the pillars of the Mishkan, right? Denotes a lord as a support, not one who has the power to destroy the other, but rather one who bears and supports the other. A good leader is someone who supports another. Thus Hashem, in contrast to the Baalim, very often the other gods of the Canaanite nations and such are called Baal, right? Baalim. So the heathen view beholds God as a power to be feared. In the heathen view, giving is a sign of weakness. Heathen gods are Elilim, denying powers, which delight in man's destruction and are inimical to his happiness. Right? They don't really care about us in the Gentile understanding of God and gods. In contrast, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitachat zrot olam. He is mekomo shel olam. Down to the lowest depths, he bears and supports everything that exists. A Baal cannot have a true Eved, right? There's no such thing as a servant who really would really serve such a person as a Baal, right? A Baal has only playthings with which to satisfy his whims. Only an Adon can truly have an Eved. Yosef carried out the task of Adonai Haaretz in the noblest sense of the word. Rav Hirsch is doing a few things in this in these paragraphs, by the way. One thing is he's defining Adon versus Baal. Baal is, a tyrant, basically, right? And Adon is a support system. And both of these are different leadership styles. Top down, or I don't know what the opposite of top down is, but right, supporting from the base. And that's the kind of leadership skill that Yosef has. So that's one thing that he's pointing out. And number two, he's also pointing out in the middle here, in this middle longer paragraph, he's pointing out, well, if that's true, maybe that can explain why we call Hashem adon, right? Why we call Hashem the master and not the Baal. We don't call him Baal, even though both words mean master, because we don't think of Hashem as that kind of master who's top down. He supports us. He builds us up. Always. So that's an important idea, two important ideas hidden in the brilliance, not so hidden, but written here in his Rav Hirsch's brilliant style. Oh boy, we have two more verses to go through. You know what? One other verse. Should we do it? Let's save this for next time. We're kind of out of time. We'll look at chapter 42, verse 38, God willing, next year, and what we can learn there. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If we're live, you can ask them now. Otherwise, you'll have to go on YouTube and ask them down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and have a happy rest of your week. Shabbat Shalom, and happy Hanukkah and Rosh Chodesh Tov.